Mira, la Nueva Libertad,
La Nueva Libertad, with its complications and its beautiful aspects, is a benchmark for development in the municipality. It's truly a benchmark, even in football.
G'day, Anthony James here for The Regeneration, your ad-free, freely available, listener-supported podcast exploring how people are regenerating the systems and stories we live by. Welcome back to Fray Bartolomé de las Casas, Alta Verapaz, as we continue a very special series from Guatemala, Central America. I wish I'd recorded how I came to find today's guest. In returning to this place that was home for a few years back at the turn of the century, I didn't know who'd still be around, alive even. I figured that my old friends Cándido and his wife Marisela, if they were still around, would still be in the returned refugee community they helped set up 30 years prior, called La Nueva Libertad, the New Freedom, just a few kilometres out of town. But after so many years, I had no chance of remembering which house was theirs, an old email address didn't work, and an old office of theirs in town was now a restaurant with tacos. So I asked around and eventually got the tip I'd find them in the current facility of the legendary non-profit they continue to work for called Adelina Calmaquin, ACM, working with women, youth, food sovereignty, agroecology, and more recently, a residential secondary school in sustainable community development. Now that stokes the fires. Anyway, next day, unannounced and entering with some timidity, I see a couple of women set back in a relatively dark office. I stick my head in and ask for Cándido, then notice the halting look on one of the women's faces. Then I halted and realised in an instant, Marisela. She looked older but not too different, and while I went a bit nuts, she was still trying to figure out who this crazy gringo was. I guess I've aged a bit more. She took us to Cándido's office nonetheless, and he recognised the old fella straight away. We caught up on some of the years that day. It was so compelling, I later proposed we press record on a walk around La Nueva, and here we are. So we start at ACM, wander around the gardens, the community, its schools, its innovative cooperative setup, and delve into the extraordinary stories of their lives and this place. Emerging from the horrors of war, and heads up, Cándido's story touches briefly on some of this at the time of his escape to Mexico, we explore that time as a young resistance organiser and how he later returned as a leader in the formation of the co-op and community. We talk about the co-op's enormous successes and challenges, reconnecting with ancestors, the changing face of Fray in Guatemala, the exciting food processing venture that just needs a little more support, by the way, reflections on a life so far, and his unflinching belief in what's possible. Cándido is an amazing bloke, astoundingly resilient and smart, and so very funny. And out here, they're lighting a beacon for Guate, and in many ways, for us all. Thanks again to old mate from Guatemala Times, Dana Patricio Scott, for so generously translating and speaking the Spanish in English, even when we were talking about him. Let's head to La Nueva Libertad.
1, 2, 1, 2. Muy bien.
Ya estamos.
Explicamos para la gente que quizás va a escuchar esto.
And so let's explain to the people who might be listening what ACM is in the first place. Oh, very good. Well, the ACM is the Adelina Calmaquin Women's Association, which was formed by women on August 15th, more or less in 1997, when it was founded by women who returned from Mexico and women who lived here in the villages of Fray came together with the objective of organizing themselves as women and to fight to improve the living conditions of women and families. And this center, well, it's the school they now have for young people. And have the young people just arrived again? Yes, they've arrived. They're in there. Here's the fish tank, where they now have vegetarian fish. You'll see, I'm going to throw a leaf on it, and you'll see. I just fed them. And what are they? They're tilapia. They're called tilapia. And you're going to see this plant that's called osh in Quechua is a tuber that we eat, but the leaf is also good for feeding fish. You know, if they're hungry, they'll come.
They feed on it.
They look like piranhas. Yes, of course. That's what I think. You can barely see them. Yes, because the water has that color, they went crazy. They're going to devour that one really fast. So we're giving them some of this leaf and another one called, what's the name of this plant? I've forgotten the name right now, but we'll see it around here. And that's all they eat, nothing but plants. And they've grown because the students learned to raise fish last year, but some didn't make it. And those that did make it had offspring. And those are the ones that we have now. And we kept them like this. They're very hardy. Very good. And this year we're going to start again because we've seen that they like the fish. Yes, of course. So today there's fish farming and those plants, and also literacy, education, and everything. There's everything. Yes, well, here at the Adalina Calmaquin Association School, they have first, second, and third básico, about 70 students. And that's high school for the people of Australia. Got it. And they are from indigenous communities that are located more or less between 12 and 50 kilometers around from the villages surrounding the urban area of Fray, and who don't have secondary schools in their community. So they come here. But some also come even though they have a school nearby, because here they learn, in addition to the areas of the national basic curriculum required by the Ministry of Education, they learn new ways of living together, in order to live better. They learn to produce food like fish. They learn to rescue and manage native and honeybee populations, and also how to diversify crops using agroecology, for example. All of this is osh, do you see? But all of this is designed to supplement the children's diet and also feed the fish. Yes, very well. And also everything about citizen participation. I can imagine all of that too. Yes, so the teachers guide them so that they can organize themselves into what they call the student government. Then the young people, in a participatory and democratic way, elect their leaders who serve for a year. And they also have committees. The food committee, for example, the cleaning committee, the discipline committee. And there's everything because the school operates like one big family. This over here is cinnamon. And this is moringa. Look. Oh, moringa. This is moringa. This plant is not native to here, but it's very nutritious. Of course. There are people in Australia who use it too. Yes, so we've put moringa with that here. They really like tamales, like chipilín. So they eat it with tamales, the leaf.
¿Y por cuánto tiempo ha estado esta?
And how long has this school been here?
Este edificio entero, pero
Well,
me
this
imagino
whole
que fue
building,
para
but I
la
imagine it
escuela.
was a school in the
¿En
first
primer lugar?
place.
Bueno,
¿En qué año fue?
en realidad,
Well, actually, the building, notice it has a plaque.
No le pusimos edad,
We didn't put
pero
an
se
age on it,
construyó hace
but it was built about
unos
15 years ago,
15
more or
años,
less.
más o menos.
Okay.
Okay, 15,
Y
2009, 10,
no recuerdo exactamente.
around there.
Al
I don't
principio fue
remember
diseñado
exactly.
para formar
At
mujeres
first, it was designed to train
y
women
capacitar mujeres y un lugar de encuentro de
and to
mujeres,
empower women,
de lideresas.
and a meeting
Y
place for
luego,
women,
ya,
for women leaders.
las
And then,
señoras que se estaban
well,
alfabetizando, porque la
the
asociación tenía un
ladies
programa
who
de
were learning to
alfabetización,
read and write because the association had a literacy
piensan
program.
de que es bueno establecer
They
la
think
escuela
it's
secundaria
good
para
to
que
establish a
vengan los
secondary
jóvenes
school
que no tienen acceso. Y por
so
eso
that young people
es que
who don't
ahora,
have access can come.
el centro de Adelina Calma aquí
And that's why the Adelina
sigue
Calma
prestando
Keen
ese
Center
servicio
continues
de
to
un
provide a
lugar de
meeting
encuentro
place
de
for women
mujeres para que se
so that
reúnan
women
las
from the
mujeres de
communities
las
can meet,
comunidades, pero
but also to provide education
también
for young people.
para dar educación a jóvenes.
Muy bien.
Very good.
No solo a las-
And
a
not
las
just to the
chicas.
girls.
No.
No,
El
no,
criterio
no,
es,
no. The criteria
ellas
is,
dicen, bueno,
they say,
equidad tiene
well,
que ser
equity
más o
has
menos
to be
50-50.
roughly
Se
50-50.
promueve eso, 50%
That's what's
de
promoted.
hombres,
50% men,
50% de mujeres.
50% women.
Esta es la chaya que te hablaba.
This is the chaya I was telling you about. The young people planted this last year. See how it is? This is a plant that has, it's energizing. Very, very good, although it doesn't taste very good. But when it's made into soup, it has many nutrients, and it's also good for feeding the fish. The fish too? Yes, yes. This one grows, you keep cutting it, and it grows back. And if you take the branches, they eat it better than today.
Y este es zapote.
And this is a
Este es un
zapote
árbol
tree.
frutal.
This is a fruit tree.
¿Ves? Ya tiene
Tan
un
bonito.
montón.
It already has a lot of fruit.
Aquí los
So
patagos
beautiful
aprenden a
too.
diversificar como
Here,
lo
the
deben de
kids
hacer en
learn
su-
to diversify,
en sus
as they
parcelas
should
en la
do in
comunidad.
their plots in the community.
Este sí lo conoces, ¿no? Es
You
el
know
bambú.
this one, right? It's bamboo.
Y esta es una especie de
And
mango.
this is a type of mango.
Entonces, ahí hay dos.
It's
Está
blooming
floreciendo
now.
ahora, ¿ves? El que está allá, mira,
Look,
ese es
that's
el
the mazapan over there.
Gran bola, sí, sí.
That
Eso está
big
muy
ball,
bueno para
that's
alimentar,
very good to eat.
para comer.
But not for the fish in this case.
No, este es para las
No,
personas.
this is for people.
Y bueno, la caña aquí no funcionó.
And
mucho.
well, the sugar cane didn't work
Y
very
esa-
well
salimos
here.
por un extravío,
And
¿ves?
now we're going to go out this way over
Entonces,
here.
Ustedes vinieron acá.
So you guys
Después
came
de
here
estar
after
en
being
el
in the
casco.
Costco around the
Porque
time
yo
I
estuve
was
acá
here
la última
last
vez.
time.
Ah, sí, no.
5 años
Or
más
was there
allá
another
antes de
place as
venir acá,
well?
¿o fue otro lugar también?
Fuimos
We
después
went there
de
after
salir de
leaving.
ahí, la asociación
The association
llega a un
reached
acuerdo
an
con el
agreement with the
alcalde
mayor,
municipal y nos dan,
and they
unas
gave us
instalaciones que
some
fueron antes
facilities
del INTA,
that used
que
to
ahora ahí
belong to
funciona
INTA,
un Instituto
where the
Nacional de
National
Educación
Institute of Diversified
Diversificada.
Education now operates.
Y ahí
Oh,
estuvimos
yes.
como un
And
par de
we
años,
were
ahí a la
there
par
for a
del-
couple
del
of
Ban
years,
Rural.
right
Exacto.
next to the
¿Es
Ban
donde
Rural.
vivió?
Ah,
Exactly,
perfecto.
that's where I lived
Ay,
Pero que fue
when I
abandonado en ese
arrived, but
tiempo.
it was abandoned at the time.
pues entonces
Yes.
allí,
So
nosotros
then we rebuilt
reconstruimos
those
esas
facilities
instalaciones.
there,
Y allí,
and that's where the
funcionó la
association's
sede de la
headquarters are
asociación.
located.
Pero en ese tiempo,
But at
en
that
realidad, ahí
time,
empezó la
Adelina
escuela de
School
Adelina,
was actually started
porque
there
ahí, empezamos
because
a,
that's where we began to
promover
encourage
que
the
las
young
socias
members to complete their
jóvenes,
basic education.
sacaran el básico. Y entonces
And
venían
so
2
they
días a
came
la
2 days
semana.
a week, and that's how
Y
we
así
started.
empezó la asociación con
The
la escuela.
association started
Sí,
with
sí.
the school.
Qué bien.
Y después ya se logró el apoyo de
And then
la
support was
Diputación
secured from the
Foral de Guipúzcoa,
Provincial
de
Council of
España, de San
Guipúzcoa,
Sebastián.
Spain, in San
Y con
Sebastian.
ese dinero se construyó el centro.
And with that money,
Y
the
ahí-
center
ahí
was
sigue.
built.
Qué bien.
And it's there.
Esto aquí ya
This
son-
is already.
mira, todo esto
Look,
estaba hacia
all
la
of
fuera de la
this was on the
comunidad. Vamos
outskirts of
pasando
the
en la
community.
periferia
We're
de la
passing by
comunidad.
on the
Pero ves,
periphery of
ahora
the
va
village.
creciendo y hay casas más para allá. Pero
But you
nosotros
see,
dejamos
now
estas
it's
calles
growing,
bastante amplias.
and there are more houses over there.
Entonces,
But we
estas
left a lot of
calles tienen
space in
15
these
metros de
streets.
ancho
These streets are 15 meters wide, which we designed this way, thinking that this town is going to grow.
¿Y ha crecido?
And has it grown? It has grown a lot.
Me imagino.
I guess so. This was a really deserted street. There's one more over there. There is one block, we call it, but it's sure to be full of people very soon.
¿Retornados?
And are they all still returnees or from anywhere? Well, basically, those of us who returned have all come back, right? A returnee is someone who came back within the framework of the October 8th agreements. We returned here on November 17th, 1994. And so that group is like, let's call it stable. Because we arrived at that time, another group arrived in March of the following year, and that's it. All the other families that have been growing are children of the returnees. And now, lately, there has been more families buying lots here and living here in the new neighborhood. This is neighborhood 4, where we're going. Right here in this part live people who speak the Pokti language. They come from Huehuetenango mostly. They've settled here. When we came, 4 neighborhoods were formed. In neighborhood 4 are those who speak the Pokti language. In neighborhood 3, the Zacatecos, that is, the majority. In neighborhood 2, those who speak the Quechua language. And in neighborhood 1, the mestizos and canjobales. That's more or less how the structure ended up. Now it's a big mix-up. And all sorts of things in every neighborhood. And I think it would be worth discussing, before we continue with the story of La Nueva, the founding of the association comes from a woman. Why was that name chosen for the association? Well, according to my colleagues, Adelina Calmaquin was the name of a real person who lived primarily in Panzos, but also in San Pedro Cacha. She was originally from San Pedro Cacha. According to history, she was a Quechua leader who fought for the defense of the Quechua people's territory. And, well, at the time, there were many difficulties in the government. Seeing a broader vision where we can all live together. Back then, it was a vision that was more exclusionary than they have now. And so, in that struggle to defend the territory of the Quechua people, when I say defense, I'm talking about the men and women of the community fighting to defend their land from the large landowners. And in an act, the repressive forces of the National Army in May 1979 committed a massacre in the main square of Panzos. This is documented by many people. More than 100 people were murdered there, including Adelina Calmaquin. And so that symbol has been adopted by various women's groups to reclaim it, and of course to ensure Adelina's story doesn't die because of her time here on earth. And that's where the name comes from. Yes, although the organization isn't just for women, because here there are people of all languages. And so the belonging is doubled, because it's the same. But wasn't that the era of Lucas Garcia de Fray, that president? Well, that massacre happened during the time of President Eugenio Lauder Garcia. during his term. At the end of his term, and then at the beginning of General Romero Lucas Garcia's. These farms where Nueva Libertad is now located belonged to Fernando Romero Lucas, and the state bought them, gave us the loan. We organized ourselves into a cooperative and created a revolving fund for the cooperative to operate. And well, that's how we acquired the land and got the lots. And naturally, the houses have changed a lot now. It's hard to see a house like it used to be. Maybe we'll see one at the very end, but right now there is something else entirely. These houses weren't like this when we came here 30 years ago, nor the streets. This is already an improvement to have this type of road surface. I remember a lot of mud. And wooden houses, even 20 years ago. Even 20 years ago. Yes, they all were tiny wooden ones. Well, the sheet metal roofing hasn't changed in most places yet, but now they have much more stable walls. Look, express shipping everywhere. Yes, well, that's different too. After the pandemic, with the lockdowns, parcel delivery companies started operating, and now they deliver everywhere. So there's a lot of business on the open market. People are starting to buy and order things, and they come through parcel delivery companies. Now, after it was so difficult to get to the market by bike or on foot, people are buying online, and that's why these companies reach us here, where so many of us go. Like 4 or 5 companies in Fray. Yes. They've all been coming to La Nueva, where for 30 years there was no mail service. There was one phone line, and to make a call, I don't know if you experienced it, but you had to go at midday to make a call because Telgua was the only phone company there. We are now inundated with everything. We haven't escaped it. No island remains. We have integrated into this system with all its good and bad aspects. Yes, that's right. So what's your story about you came here? How did it go? Oh, mine? Interesting. It looks a bit like how the streets used to be. Exactly. That's what I was thinking. That's how things were before, more or less. A historical artifact. The advancements are still there. There are memories here of the past and now of the present. We're going over there, and you'll see, you see, within the framework of the October 8th agreements, signed by the refugee leaders and the Guatemalan government at that time. 96? No, before. 96 are the peace accords. These were signed before. I think 94... We came long before. Yes, we came here in 1994. I don't remember the exact date. It was earlier, like 2 or 3 years before 94. And there, the story goes that we, those of us who were in the refugee camp, could decide when, where, and how to return to Guatemala. Where were you? I was in Comitán de Domínguez in Chiapas. In recent years, I was there working to organize the return. And I decided to come here because I believed at that time that it was a place that it was quite well connected. No, I didn't want to go to a place with a lot of connectivity problems like roads or electricity. That was important to me. And that's why I decided I had information about where the community was, the land, which was near the municipal capital, and I said, well, let's go there. My partner and I discussed it, we reached an agreement, and of course we decided, in a rather illusory and hopeful context, we believed in the October 8th agreements, we believed in the government's commitments, we believed in the commitments of the international community. We thought that rebuilding a town would be easier. So at that time, we called it a dignified and organized return. And well, we came here by plane. The UNHCR chartered some cargo planes for Mexico, and we arrived there in Fray. I arrived around 11 in the morning on November 17th, 1994. It was so hot here. Abysmal. Yes, it really affected me. When I got off the plane, of course, after living in Comitán, which really has a lovely climate, and I felt the steam of Fray. And then you look back and you say, oh, am I sure I'll stay? And we said, yes, I'm sure I'll stay. And that's how the story began. And with Marisela, yes, and with Otto, who was 1 year old. Okay, and where did you meet? In Mexico. She worked with women, and I worked organizing the return with the permanent commissions. They had an education commission, and I was there. And we crossed paths in those committees, and that's how we met, in the camps. And you got married there? Yes. We got together there in Comitán. We had a ceremony there very much like with the female leaders. And those female leaders married us. It was not the church, but they said, well, you are like this, and we declare you compañera and compañero. And that's it. Another kind of church. Yes, that's how we got together. Still something sacred. Yes. And originally, then, you were, well, near Ixcan with your parents, where they are still? Yes, originally, my parents lived in a village called El Palmar de San Miguel Uspantan. I was born there. By the way, I went there 2 years ago, and I found the house where I was born. My father had arrived there 50 years ago, and it was very exciting. I had a very, very, very vague memory of what the house was like. And here, it was like this. This is how we all got around back then. Crazy on a bike. I remember it well. Yes. There weren't any motorcycles. Well, we arrived, and I took them. They said, we want to go to El Palmar. I want to see where I was born too, right? And we went. It was incredible. When we arrived in Chicaman, my father said, well, son, from here to there, ask me. I know the way. Okay, Dad, then go ahead and guide me. We arrived in Uspantan, and he knew the way, right? He said, we've already checked into our lodgings. Tomorrow we'll go to the village, which is maybe 15 kilometers from the town. And I said to him, well, Dad, where are we going? No idea, son. This place has changed so much. And then I said, well, let's ask around. I say, let's go east, shall we? Looking for the Chisoy River. They call it the Rio Negro there. And my father had no idea where, like me and Fray now, of what it had been like. No, he had no idea. Wow, it had changed so much too. A lot. He says there were hills like that had no vegetation when he lived there. And now that we've arrived, it's full of forests of pines, live oaks, white oaks, because it's national land. That's what I learned. So there are some families, the Reyes, the Urizar, the Ramirez, and they live scattered like that in hamlets. They have another name for it. And it was very exciting to arrive. At first, to me, it seemed like a desolate town. Completely, it shocked me. When I arrived, I said, well, Dad, where's the village here? It's here. And I said, but there's no one here, right? There's no one here and everything's closed. So he was going to look for a lady who was a friend of his named Irene. And anyway, and Doña Irene, he asked, and the lady says, the older one or the daughter? I say the older one, logically. Oh, she lives in that little house. We knocked, and the old lady came out, and she said, Bartolo. That's my dad's name. They hugged, and she said, and him? Well, he's Cándido. Oh, well, all your children are mine. She was my midwife. She passed away last year, but I still saw her. There are two brothers who died from malnutrition at that time, from curable diseases like diarrhea and all that. And my mother wanted to identify her children at the cemetery. Impossible. After many years, they cannot go because they migrate to Ixcan, and they are more or less 10 years in Ixcan. Then came the worst of the war. They had to flee. They spent 12 or 14 years in Mexico, and back then, Ixcan wasn't like today. Now I can just hop in a car and go. Back then, to get to Uzbantan, he had to walk for 3 days. There was no road. And so arriving and seeing where your loved ones were was impossible. That's where I come from. Later, I spent my youth in Santa Maria Ceja. And in the prime of my youth, I participated in the resistance struggle after they burned my village. So we survived, and I participated in all the organizations. My father is from a very religious Catholic family, so I was too. And so I had these conflicting thoughts about what to do, you know? Because we were civilians. My parents were members of a cooperative. But the government at that time believed that cooperative members were communists. And if they were considered communists, they had to be killed. So it was a very narrow view of the government. That's why I think now that education has to give a broad view of the world. That is, there's room for everyone on this earth, regardless of your beliefs, whether it's through cooperatives, private enterprise, or if it's on an individual level or through collective action, whether you believe in any religion, any culture. I believe we can live together. I believe we can be complementary. And that vision we somehow try to instill in young people so that war caused by the very, very narrow views of governments never happens again. And of course, back then it was very hard because the soldiers were young campesinos, and they were killing young people and elderly people who were also campesinos. Now, I understand very well what was happening back then, right? But the struggle wasn't about what is commonly taught. No, it wasn't a class struggle between rich and poor. It wasn't. For me, those who governed saw us as a colony, as colonialism, as if the Spanish came and said, well, these lands are mine because I arrived, and the indigenous people are mine too. And that way of thinking was extremely prevalent in the 80s, in the 70s, even the 90s. And it still persists today. I mean, it hasn't been eradicated. There's less of it, but the forms of government no longer use the army like they did back then to repress people. Now they use other methods. For example, the defense of the Quechua people's territory continues today because, well, I think there are, well, the businessman has the right to set up his business, but what he doesn't have the right to do is take the land away from the small farmer. And that's the problem in Alta Verapaz in recent years, where there are hydroelectric plants, where there are oil companies, where there are palm plantations, and they try to deceive the small farmer. Practically speaking, the land is stolen, and then, through the legal system, it's not the army anymore, but the judicial system that represses in Guatemala. Before, it was the soldier who persecuted you. Now, it's the public prosecutor's office. Before, they killed you. Now, they put you in jail. It's another way of killing you, isn't it? And so I think that we have to keep fighting to be free, but free in thought. That is, to decolonize our thinking in order to build a democratic society. Well, it's a long story. So while the young people who were in the army were carrying rifles, we were the young people in cooperatives carrying stones. That's how it was. Well, that's how I am now. And then I take refuge, right? And, well, in the village, the army burned it down, you say? Yes, they burned it. So what? Did people die there too? Did many people die there? Or did they all flee somewhere else beforehand? Most of us fled. We fled towards the mountains. However, while fleeing, because it wasn't very organized, because, as I said, there were cooperative members, we were young. I remember at that time in Ceja, there was no running water, much less drinking water. We bathed in the river, right? And I was in the river when we heard some gunshots. And then my friend said to me, no, we have to get out of here. Let's go home. And we ran home. How old were you? I was 16, between 16 and 17 years old. And we ran home. And at home, my parents and siblings had already left the house. And then we went out too. We went toward our plot of land, and I found... Well, the army had arrived at the village. They started shooting everywhere. And did they arrive by car? No, not yet. On foot. Walking? On foot, because there was no roads. They went in on foot. And they started shooting everyone they looked at. That day, they didn't kill anyone from my village. The next day, or 3 days later, I don't remember, they killed some children who they were hiding in a plot of land, and a patrol discovered them. They were with some pregnant women. They were all from the same family, and they were killed. I think about 15 children and a pregnant woman. That number may vary. All of this is documented, right? I was left with 3 younger siblings because my parents got lost during the escape, and we were left alone for more than 15 days in the mountains with absolutely nothing. And I joined the group of mestizos from Ceja, and together we stood guard. The people stood guard to protect ourselves. The adults, the women, cooked food at night, and the men went to the fields for corn, right? To the granaries. And that's how we were surviving. We went out in a group, right? So we, young people, our job was to stand guard and erase what we called footprints. But it was impossible to erase them. And where a lot of people went, we left a big trail. And that was the way to resist, right? In an organized way. And I was already in what we called camps. At that time, the communities of people in resistance, which came later, didn't exist yet. And at that time, we were simply fleeing. It is the same time as the massacre in Panzos. After. I'm already talking about 1982, February of 82. I think the 14th or the 12th was a very difficult time. It was very difficult, but that was the case in many places. It was like that in Ceja, but it was like that all over the country, especially where indigenous communities lived. And from what culture did they come, or do they come? Because they're still alive, right? Yes, my parents, I think there was a process of mestizaje, of racial mixing. I haven't figured it out exactly. I think my paternal grandparents came from Alta Verapaz, I think. And I think my maternal grandparents were from Totonicapán, I think. It's not something I'm certain about, but I think it was a process of mestizaje that went on for many years. And then the Reyes, the Argueta and Ramirez families lost the Quechua language because I understand that at some point we should have spoken either Quiché or Uspantleco, or perhaps the Pocom language of Raminal. But all of that was lost over the years. And when we got to Ceja, well, my parents didn't speak it anymore. I knew my grandparents, and they didn't speak it either. So I don't know exactly when it was lost, but based on my deductions and the surnames, I think we come from there. So what was the year when, well, I understand the whole family went to Mexico. Yeah. What year was it? In 82. Oh, wow, quick. Yes, there were 2 or 3 months in the mountains, and then we started running out of food, and then there was a heated discussion among the people. What do we do? At that time, in March of 82, the coup d'etat takes place. Rios Montt declared an amnesty, and they were flying all over Ixcan in small planes saying, "Brother." They weren't calling us cooperative brothers, but subversive brothers. Surrender. There's a new president, and he's going to spare your lives. And then the catechists and the cooperative members discussed what to do in Ceja. There were 2 groups. Some decided to stay for a while, and the mestizo group decided to leave immediately. There were young people who knew the border, and that group of young people led the others, not by road, but through the mountains, through the jungle, because they would have been killed on that road, right? And another group decided to stay even longer, maybe a year, in the early days of the CPR in Ixcan, living in under the mountain. And one group surrendered to the army with the amnesty. Then Santa Maria Ceja was completely divided. One group went to Mexico, another group stayed in the resistance, and another group surrendered to the army. And from there the story begins. The ordeal for the people of many years until they returned around May 1994 to Ceja. They reunited with the families who had surrendered to the army. That was very impactful because they united and rebuilt their ways of life. Of course, each group had different experiences. Those who came from Mexico had certain ways of working and organizing. And I think that those who stayed under the control of the army, it was very difficult because while there, even as refugees, they practiced values like democracy, freedom, a culture of peace, and the rejection of violence. And those who stayed, well, it was militarism, obeying the army commander, the patrol commander. And I think that's where those 2 worldviews meet in that community. I think those who stayed behind felt unprotected at some point. Because when someone gets used to having to ask permission for everything, and then others come along and say, "No, here we decide, we are going to reorganize the village." So I imagine that was tough. Well said. So I didn't experience that because I didn't go back there. I came back this way. I'm going back in November. In the agreements of October 8th, there were 3 categories of people. The cooperative members who are going to reclaim their lands, cooperative members in Ixcan, those who owned municipal land, which was a large part of the community from Huehue, and the young people, the landless ones. So I fell into the category of the landless youth, right? Children of farmers. And we also had the right to access land. And that's why I came here. Another story. We came here where there were no relatives, where no one who knew us before was waiting for us, but rather where the Quechua people were, who had also lived in the same conditions as the families who were in Ceja. When we arrived here, we went outside and started making contact with Cispila, which is right there, quite small, and people were closing their doors because before we came, the Guatemalan army had run a campaign telling the Quechua people that we returnees were bad people and that the same story. Yes. And, well, we arrived and we wanted to do some business. Buy oranges, because there was nothing here. And some of them who had served in the army were the most open. They really wanted to talk to us. We started making contact with them. This road you see over there, that one leads to the villages in the south. There was no road there because the landowner, who now owns the palm plantation, wouldn't give them permission to build a road there. So when we came, we gave permission to build the road here and helped them negotiate with the landowner, and that's how they built the road. This was during a time of fairly democratic government. That was helpful. And when you went south, instead of paying to have roads built, you used the new one. Today they still use it, just like Chotal, just like Cispila. We've integrated, in my opinion, quite well. Of course, this has not been easy. Yes, there have been visions of us too, mostly of older people, of women and men, who all wanted to be on an island. And when I came here, I was 30. Today I'm 60. And so the young people of that time who were at the forefront of all this, well, we were completely crazy. We wanted to create a beautiful community. We had many assemblies to talk things through. The good thing was that we discussed all of our differences in assembly and then voted. So, for example, here in this village of Nueva Libertad, women and men have land. The men have lots, the women have lots. And that was achieved in those early assemblies. The streets that are now 15 meters wide, where we're walking, also had two strong visions. The old folks who came from Huehue, especially the mestizos, wanted to leave 3 meters of street. And others, who were also indigenous, said no. So the majority. But we didn't come to lay streets. We came because we want land. And we young people said, yes, we agree with you. We want land, but this town is going to grow, and we have the opportunity to leave a well-planned town with streets and avenues that took us time in the workshops. That's why we spent 6 months in the workshops, designing how we would build the village, and we planned it very well. In the end, the idea, in my opinion, and supported by many older people as well, because we have to acknowledge that, but especially by the young people of that time predominated. And that's why we have wide streets today. At that time, I was also on the improvement committee, the community's residents, because at the time the cocodes weren't in place, decided to set aside 2 hectares of the village's civic center and more than 1 hectare of the school. Another debate. Huge! Why so much space for the school? Because we're going to grow. The education is important, and that was in the assemblies. It was tiring, very tiring, because there were things that were obvious to many of us, that land had to be set aside for that, while for others, it was no, and no. But in the end, in the vote, even if it was just by 1 vote, the idea that, yes, a large space for the school won, and a large space was set aside for the school. By the way, we didn't set aside any space for the church. Yes. And there still isn't one? We didn't leave it at the community level. Then the churches reacted and said, where does that leave us? And of course, then the Catholic Church managed to keep the best plot of land in the center at the Cooperative Assembly. Of course, I didn't vote for it. I'm Catholic, but I didn't vote for it because no. And the evangelical churches bought land. That was another process, too. I mean, look, there were two visions. One, yes, everyone in a cooperative, but there was a vision of a cooperative with associative ownership, and another of a cooperative with individual ownership. That's where we lost. I was one of the ones who wanted a cooperative with associative ownership. That is, yes, I have my plot, but all the property belongs to the cooperative, and to prevent the buying and selling of land and to ensure no one is left without land, but we lost there. So the idea of individual ownership won out, and we respect it fully. And that's the model we have today, private ownership. Everyone has a deed, and there's a market for buying and selling land. Many people have lost their land, but we knew the consequences of that was coming. That's intense. Yes, yes. But what about after 30 years, in this context? Would you still consider it a success to maintain the cooperatives and its democratic structure? And it seems to be working, even though it's growing quite a lot, which could present a new challenge. But is it going well? Yes, look, the cooperative has had its development, not linear, but I would say spiral, from having only the land to owning a hotel, to owning a cable company, to a rubber production facility, already having the land reserves that we had left as that no one would touch as a reserve, as protected forest. I believe those decisions have had significance. Today there are several opinions for some who believe the cooperative has already fulfilled its purpose, right? I guess so. Yes, because they say, okay, how much money do we receive each year? And they receive 600 quetzales. And then we say, no, but what do we do for the cooperative? And we do nothing. So that debate exists from the beginning. I think there's a 30% who never wanted the cooperative model, who wanted land, and that's why they're there. And now I think that 30% has grown to 40% who don't want the cooperative model, but they want what the cooperative has built. And the cooperative survives because most people still say it's important. But I don't know for how long. For example, in Malcotal, which you visited, where you saw that lagoon the oil company built, there were like some 7 caballerias of land. I may be mistaken about the data, but we left it as a reserve from when it was divided into parcels. It's the same cooperative. Yes, it's the same cooperative. We bought 3 farms, 4 actually, San Fernando, Tuila, Malcotal, and La Caoa. And we should tell the listeners that this is a plot of land that also belonged to Lucas. Exactly. We bought from that general more than 70 caballerias that belonged solely to him, and it was one of his small plots of land, because he owned many here in Alta Verapaz, many nationwide, because at that time, well, and even now, presidents appropriate public property. And then he sold it to us, right? And I think that now the cooperative is at a moment of decision for the future. It may well stay for a while longer. There are some members who are eager for us to sell everything the cooperative owns. Sell the main building, sell the land, but well, that's a narrow view in my opinion, because those 7 caballerias of land we set aside as a reserve 2 years ago, it was decided in an assembly that these would be allocated to members without public deeds. And there we have roughly 1 hectare per family. And those who want to sell quickly forget that it can't be sold because that land no longer exists in the land registry. Because there are duplicate deeds, and that needs to be fixed. Well, I think the most important thing is that people keep fighting to get ahead. And the cooperative hasn't managed to generate the job opportunities that many thought it would. But of course, that thinking of some is a bit contradictory, because when you decide it's a cooperative with private property, that already sets you on a course. It already determines the individual growth of each member, and we only have a few things in common. So I'm very clear on that. Here, things have grown. There are those who no longer dedicate themselves to agriculture. They dedicate themselves to business. Others have become professionals. They do work with the government, with the banking system. Here in this community, you have teachers, you have lawyers, you have accountants, you have agronomists, you have merchants, and now you also have many migrants. Many people who have seen an opportunity to go to the United States to work and earn money, and there are hundreds of young people. Just from La Nueva? Just from La Nueva, but hundreds. There isn't a single family that doesn't have a relative there. I think the only one that doesn't is mine. But that's because I already have 2 children, one here and one in Argentina. If I had 8, I'm sure half would be there, over there in the United States. You were saying that remittances from there are the largest source of income in Guatemala. It's a form of export, shall we say. Yes, according to some analysts, Guatemala's gross domestic product is sustained by remittances, and the main source of income today, Guatemala's main product, is remittances. The Nueva Libertad is an example. The largest source of income for Nueva Libertad comes from remittances sent by our brothers and sisters who are undocumented in the United States. People have died there from here. At least 4 have died in accidents at construction sites. Because, of course, those who go here aren't going to do the office jobs. They're going to do the jobs that Americans often don't want to do. Yes, of course, exactly. And that's when things get tough. Sure, and you say there are millions of people from Guatemala there. Yes, the other day I was reading some data that a researcher, whose name I don't remember, gave, and he said that there are 4 million Guatemalans in the United States. And most of them are in Los Angeles. This huge fire is threatening many people, migrants from Mexico, but also from Guatemala. Yes, Guatemala's population is now 18 million. So, proportionally, it's a large part of the Guatemalan people. And I also think, of course, in this era of Trump, that the states are going to lose out without the workers who do the work that others don't want to do, as you say. Yeah. Let's see. I don't think so. No. He's not going to achieve what he wants, because I believe that the same people there need poorly paid labor for themselves, even though it's very good for us, because, well, over there we know that the lowest earner makes about $15 to $20 an hour. The lowest earner. And of course, here it is 12 quetzales an hour, which is equivalent to about $1.50. So what's very good for our brothers and sisters is that they're in the conditions they're in, of course, renting houses in these groups, having a lot of limitations on being able to send money to Guatemala. And watch out, because the other day I heard the president from Mexico, and she said that the Mexican brothers and sisters only managed to send 30% of what they earned back to Mexico. And 70%, they have to use it in the United States to survive. And that's similar to what's happening here. So a country that wants to export its workforce, I think they're going to lose a lot too. And of course, if there were a capitalist economic system, but one of competition where everyone wins, I think there wouldn't be a need for this migration situation. Because if we emigrate, it is because the United States has historically used Guatemala as a country to plunder. And then, yes, of course, if they keep looting us, what do they say? Then we can't. We're not stupid. I mean, we're intelligent. We're hard workers. But if you don't have the means, while over there they have machinery, and here you are with a machete, well, it's impossible to complete, right? Unless you have a different perspective and say, okay, I'll forget all this nonsense and I'll start living on my own little life. But of course, young people don't want to leave the global village. You need money for the internet, you need money for a car, you need money to travel. It's impossible, isn't it? So I hope they don't achieve what they're proposing. For now, the younger generation from La Nueva doesn't think so. They already lived through the time this man's government was in power, and the people didn't leave. They stayed there. And look, now we have it here. Look. An agency of the Inter-American Bank, Industrial Bank, a stationery store. That's right then. There used to be nothing on this street. Hello. Yes, it's so different. And your house? We're almost there. Straight ahead. 2 blocks. Look, we have to...
Buenos días, señora. Bueno, da igual. Lo importante es que nos saludamos. Sí. ¿Qué tal, José León? Buenas tardes.
Y pues tenemos que hablar.
And we have to talk about that owner you mentioned, about what we can see from here, the African palm. Ah, yes, by the way, if you look there, you can see the palm tree. Yes, indeed. I saw it on Google Maps the other day. We're on a street 15 meters away. The palm starts 15 meters away from the community. 15 meters. And right up to the processing plant? Yes, and more. It's kilometers of palm groves. And to the north as well, through the plot, as I saw, surrounded by palm trees. Surrounded? Surrounded by palm trees. Ah, yes, this little forest we have left is in the south. But anyway, here, you know, the other day there was a fly problem, and people were complaining that flies were eating their dogs' ears, and their cats and chickens too, and we were saying, well, why? Apparently, the palm tree company introduced a type of fly as a biological control, but this fly is, it sucks the blood of animals. And here, as they come to throw the matter left over, raw material, not raw material, but the waste, after extracting the oil, which they call, I don't know, I think it's gravel, and they throw it away to fertilize the palm, but since that's not yet completely composted, it's in the process, and that's why it attracts so many flies. And those who live around here get it really, really badly. It gets to my house less, but it still gets there, because I'm only about 2 blocks away, you see. Some people have told me it smells really bad, too. Yes, that's the thing. Like I said, it's not yet in a state of complete decomposition, otherwise it would be fertilizer. It's still rotting, so it stinks terribly, and it attracts bugs, too. I'm trying to imagine the process of cutting down all the trees, the entire forest from that land. It must have been incredibly difficult. Yes, look, over there where that palm is, there used to be farmers who had abandoned pasture. But the one who had pasture along the banks of the streams, there was forest because they need it to give water to the animals. So the farmer who had pasture left a certain amount of forest to conserve the water sources because he needs the water for the animals. And then the palm oil companies came and wiped out those small forests that were there. And then, yes, in those small forests on those farms, where the last remaining wild animals lived, well, when that happened, it was a complete disaster. In Fray, they bought large farms, unlike other places where they bought small plots. They were interested in large farms. And then, here at the Cooperative, they came, wanting to buy that reserve I'm telling you about, to plant palm trees. We went to a meeting and said no. It was said no. At the Adelina school years ago, when they started, they received much more criticism than they do today. Now we know them. We know what they do. We know that not everything they do will do damage. But many practices damage the water sources and the soil, right? But we know them now. Back then we didn't. And there was a kind of a view among some people who didn't want anything to do with them. And another group of us who are like, well, let's see what happens. And that time at school, I organized a field trip for the students to go and meet the technicians and hear them speak. I told them, you have to see for yourselves, not just what I tell you. We organized it, and they welcomed us. They stopped the machinery for that time to attend to the students. They gave them hard hats and explained, well, this is what we do. They saw the factory, and then we returned to the school. And we said, so what do you think? What do you see? And the students began to give their critical opinions, right? They, too, accompanied the social workers and the main engineers. And I said to them, so what? What are you going to do now? Well, now we're going to reflect. I taught that in a social sciences class. And I said, okay, now we're going to reflect on what you've observed. And well, the students were amazed. They said, oh, we've never seen machinery like that. And others said, but it stinks. But it's just one plant. There's no diversity of forests. I tell them, what's the difference between what we're telling you here? Because we're talking about diversifying crops for food production, and they say over there they only produce one thing. They only produce oil, and here at the school we produce everything. And then the men were listening to the young people's opinions. They respected the opinions. They didn't debate. They just listened. And then they ask me, what does the school need? And I tell them, well, teachers' salaries. This is self-financing. And they say, well, let us think about what we can do. And they came back soon, about 2 months later. A delegation came, and he asked for a meeting. And we gave him the opportunity. He said, we can help the Adelina school. We offer you a high school diploma program in the Palma. We pay the teachers, and you set up the school with the high school diploma program, which is a diversified program in the Palma. We'll finance it, and we said no. Definitely not. So I tell them, look, you know what? Go ahead and finance it, right? The school, and let the Women's Association decide what the study model will be. They left immediately. Nope, they didn't even give us a bottle of oil. It's just, that's just how it was. Not a single bottle. That's what I heard you saying in my mind, your words about broad education. That's not it. Of course, you can't reduce yourself to, look, we're talking about palm trees. But when you have, the problem is monoculture, really. The problem is, it doesn't matter if that's the case. If you have to sacrifice all forms of life, the diversity of life in a territory, even the water, you're going to affect the elements of life, as the Quechua people say. The water, the air, the land, you're going to kill them. As we say here, the palm oil is bread for today, hunger for tomorrow. Yes, and we've seen it. For example, there are many people here, some young, not many, who work in the palm groves. Many of the young people from La Nueva who have gone as day laborers to work in the palm groves can't handle the work days and say, no way, we're not going back to work in the palm groves. But the young people from the communities, because they hire 35 to 18-year-olds, yes, 35 at the most. Why? Because they need a lot of energy to cut the bunches of palm fruit, and that's heavy. And then the people who own the land in the communities, they need a means of transportation to get to the palm plantation. They sell a piece of land, buy a motorcycle, and use it for work. The palm company pays them the minimum wage established by Guatemalan law, but as you can see, it's minimal. And with that money they earn, since they can no longer dedicate themselves to producing food, they don't have enough to buy food. It's the cycle. And then there's a man I'm going to mention to you now. He's what's his name? Siriaco, from over there in Malcutan. He has about 3 or 4 hectares, diversified. He has everything. And I tell him, look, what's up with your neighbor? He says, because he works with the palm trees. That's why his land is overgrown. But I'm going to buy that land, he says, because I'm diversifying. Every year I sell pepper, I sell cinnamon, I sell rubber, I sell chickens, I sell everything. And with the salary they'll use to buy the motorcycle that's going to break down in 2 years, they're going to sell another piece of land. I am preparing to buy that piece because I provide jobs here, he said. He's a model of a farmer who lives off the land, who doesn't just have one thing, he has many things. He has a little difficulty walking. He walks with a limp, and he says, I'm here. I produce everything. That's it. Sometimes I don't have money, but I have food. On the other hand, the man in La Palma, if he doesn't get paid or prices go up, he doesn't have much food. That's the model. So, well, the companies in Guatemala, they pay so little, unlike the European companies in Spain that I knew, which are companies that always win. But the standard of living for workers is different. I mean, the worker has more or less what they need to have life covered. In other words, a worker has vacation time. You can join Social Security. Well, not here. Here, companies earn too much and workers earn very little. That's the secret. So that's why growth is so uneven. It's abysmal. Yes, it has been interesting because of the town of Fray. Everyone speaks of awareness, of truly understanding what La Palma has cost. It's even an environmental awareness, which I didn't see 20 years ago. So on the one hand, it's an education in itself, but a very damaging one. It turned out that many people now know and regret what has happened. And Don Seferino, the previous mayor, told me that the municipality couldn't defend itself against that supposed development, which came from much larger forces, from the federal government and, of course, the companies.
¿Es tu información también que la
The municipality couldn't do anything different?
hacer algo diferente? No podía, pues, si ustedes
If you all
decidieron
decided
que
against
no,
it, why couldn't the
¿por qué la MUNI no
municipality?
podía?
Mira, lo que
Me, look,
dice la persona que citas,
the person you quoted,
yo creo que
I think it represents
a nivel nacional
at the national level
quién gobierna
who
este país.
governs this country.
Este país es
This
gobernado
country
por
is governed
los
by big
empresarios
business,
grandes, por le llaman
by, they call
las
it
siglas
the acronym CACIF,
donde están los
which includes the
financieros,
financiers,
los
the industrialists, the
los,
agribusinesses,
el agro, y ellos
and they
adquirieron mucha riqueza.
acquired a lot of
sus
wealth from their
tatarabuelos en el tiempo de la
great-great-grandparents during
colonia.
colonial times.
Por eso están las
That's
familias,
why
los
there are
Pantaleón,
all
los
families like
Herrera,
the
los Botranes,
Pantaleones,
los
the
Arzú,
Herreras, the Botranes, the
los,
Azures, and the Pollo Campero, I was going to say, but it's the Gutierrezes, right? And so I could name 20 families who aren't exactly hard workers, but they, just like in the colony, during the time of the Spanish colony, clearly saw the government in the hands of... It was clear that the power was exercised by the colonizer, the landowner. He sets the rules. In the signing of the Independence Treaty of 1821, they made a treaty between liberals and conservatives which allows them to maintain economic power in Guatemala. But they pretend that political power belongs to the people, that there is, well, over the years that there has been a democratic government. But that's false, because in Guatemala there are no real political parties. In my opinion, there are instruments of these powerful families who stage the charade of democracy, of elections every 4 years, but they are still behind all that power. They fund the campaigns of people with leadership qualities to become congressmen, mayors, and even presidents. And that's why I understand Don Ceferino saying it's impossible for the municipality to oppose this development system. I don't think it's impossible. I believe we need to form alliances because ultimately we Guatemalans pay for the money the state manages, not just the wealthy, but everyone, through taxes. Here we all pay taxes, absolutely everyone. And it's a matter of, what do you want? I mean, how far do you want to commit? Of course, if you're mayor who wants to have a good life on a personal level, well, if you fall outside of that script, they're going to screw you over. So you have to be prepared to suffer the consequences, to say, no, I'm going to run a government of the people here. But what's easier? To be receiving commissions from construction companies and from the other companies that come into the municipality, like the extractive companies. We're talking about palm oil, hydroelectric companies, oil companies, or to run a good democratic government. I believe it is possible that the fight must be waged because there should be an economy, there should be business people in Guatemala, but those business people shouldn't control political or judicial power. They say that democracy is made up of 3 independent branches of government: the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branches. In Guatemala, we elect the executive. They use tricks and all to make us believe in the presidential and vice presidential candidates. But when we elect representatives, there are like 2 categories: those from the national list, which nobody knows, and those from the departments. This traffic, it's definitely different. to have this kind of traffic here in La Nueva. Yes.
Adiós.
And then, for example, I think that we only half-heartedly elect our representatives because there are many we don't know. And there's the system, the judicial branch. I don't know of any other Central American country where it's elected, nor in Mexico. And I don't think it's the same in the United States. The judicial branch, they name each other, and that power, it's like it's above the other two branches of government in Guatemala today. So if that's going to be the case, at least we should get to choose them too. Of course, we should know who the people are who will be on the courts, who will be the judges. But for that, you need not to have an illiterate population. Look, there's a population that knows how to read and write, but that doesn't look beyond that. And when I say an educated population, I mean a population that understands these processes and has the freedom to propose. Today, they make us choose. We don't choose. If they tell us, here's this, this, and this, right? And in that sense, well, I think it's difficult for the municipalities, but I think that has to change. And I have hope that it will change. Maybe in a couple of decades, if we continue down the path that we're on today with this government. The government has many problems, but at least there's now a power in which the powerful class today does not have 100% power, which is the executive branch, because this president was not appointed by them. And so he has a lot of criticism and all that, I understand. But of course, if you're alone with a lot of people who have a different vision of how to build the community, well, it's difficult, right? Yes, and not having that power anymore, if we continue in the next elections maintaining that quota, but also getting more representatives, I think we can aspire to a real democracy. But for that, we have to lose the fear of participating. And when I say lose the fear, I don't mean that you're going to expose yourself.
Hola, un gusto verles. Ya satisfecho.
We have to get rid of this enemy. Let's take a walk around here, and then we'll go down there. The school's right there. All this land belongs to the school. That place I was telling you about over there, the debate, from there to there. Oh, really? And it's not lost yet? No. This was later passed to the Ministry of Education. Now, this is no longer in the name of the community, but in the Ministry of Education. Yes. So all this was sometimes planted by the kids here at school. Hey, they still have the composting latrines. What's that palace? That's from a young man who emigrated to the United States. A young man? And I know that he works for a construction company and also at an evangelical church. Apparently, it's a company that pays a lot of money. There's a lot of tithing there, I think. Okay. So you said you still have hope that things will change. And how do you explain that you still maintain this disposition in the face of all this? I think we each have, whether we can explain it or not, we believe in a lifestyle, a way of life. And I'm one of those people who thinks that if I want to be well as an individual, and when I say well, I mean healthy, able to move around easily regardless of age, and have access to services like water and education in my own home, Well, that only works if everyone has the same things. To fight to have water in the community at that time was also a struggle for me to have water in my house. Fighting for good roads is also about having access. You're not going to fight for a good road if, of course, there aren't even any horses in your community. And I believe that. And on the other hand, I think what I learned from the conflict has helped me a lot. From the conflict that happened in Guatemala. I learned so much. I'm clear on why there was so much bloodshed. I understand perfectly why the young men fought. And to sum it up, the problem is that there was a dominant group that took advantage of people's ignorance. If we have an education with a socio-critical approach and a human development model, that wouldn't have happened. Nobody would have wanted to pick up a gun to kill someone. I mean, what do you want for yourself? You want to live well, don't you? You want to be with your family. You want to walk in the woods. You want to go to the city. You can build your house. It doesn't matter the style. It's going to be your house. It's going to be very beautiful to you. And even if it looks ugly to someone else, but just because it looks ugly to someone else doesn't give them the right to destroy it. And that's the point. That's where I think we can all live respecting that way of life. And so I think that the fight must continue. I wake up every day thinking that this has to change. Sure, I'm aware that I'm 60 years old today, but sometimes I don't think I am. Same here, man. So what kind of work do you do? What's your specific role within the association? What's your objective? Well, I do two types of work. There's the formal technical kind, which over the years I've specialized in, focusing on the management of community development projects. And that's what I do in the association. And that's how I get paid, by projects. It's not a permanent job, right? Sometimes I'm unemployed. It ends because the life of a project has a limited time. It has well-defined resources and well-defined actions to achieve results in a specific time and place. That's it. We're not going to change the country with projects. No, not that kind. I'm very clear on that. But also, even though the financial compensation isn't much, I'm happy to be there because I can share many things in common with my colleagues and with the young people. For example, giving access to education to young people who don't have it satisfies me. Being able to facilitate a farmer-to-farmer exchange of methodologies so that everyone can learn from each other's best practices makes me very happy. And so, no. I think I dedicate more time to those things of sharing methodologies for what in the South they call good living. I've been studying these models. And in Guatemala there are many difficulties. But I believe we must work for living well. What else? Yes. Look at this. This is what the little ones have planted from the elementary school students. And there's the classroom. And how many years ago was that then? About 30 years ago or what? Yes, well, the land about 30 years ago. These woods maybe 20, 25 years ago. The hall about 18 years ago, and well, we built that hall with the profits from the cooperative. There was a time when latex was worth a lot, so we made a profit and we did it. With that, we finished paying off the land because it was a revolving fund. And the casco belongs to the cooperative? It belongs to the cooperative. That was the house of General Lucas, and it is already a hotel and restaurant. It's a hotel. It's the place where the headquarters of the Nueva Visión company is located. There's a dining room, a meeting room, and also a beer kiosk, the guys say. It's maintained by the cooperative. Yes, very good. There's a very significant achievement in this as well, isn't there? In itself, that is, that this land has become part of the cooperative, and all the activities and the community are part of it. It can still be a symbol of, I don't know, of the vision you have. I think that, look, La Nueva Libertad, with its complications and its beautiful aspects, is a benchmark for development in the municipality. It's truly a benchmark, even in football. Really? Seriously. These guys here have their little World Cup every year. They put 40 teams in to play over 2 days, and they come from all over. So La Nueva is I think our goal, our dream of arriving, of living, not just surviving, but giving and being part of Guatemala, we've achieved it. With difficulties, but we're achieving it. And well, there are many things to do, community things, those long assemblies where we've debated everything, and they happen less and less and are more heterogeneous because now we're clearly separated what belongs to the cooperative from what belongs to the community. We elect the COCODE every year, and families who aren't from the community also have the right to be members of the COCODE. And that's where the different perspectives begin, right? For example, these streets still belong to the cooperative right now. Been a heated debate. They say, well, we want... The municipality says, I can't fix the streets because they're private. Transfer them to the municipality. We say, if I give them to you, what happened with Fray will happen again, with people encroaching on them. And so why don't we reach a mixed agreement with the municipality involved, but also with the cooperative also involved? There are attempts here sometimes. There have been attempts by some families, for example, to narrow the streets. They take in 1 meter or 2. And the cooperative has forced them to return. That doesn't happen in Fray. They invade public areas, and the municipality hasn't had the power to enforce respect for public property. It's very clear why not. Because people say, well, what do you think? Well, people get corrupted. For now here, that hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. That's another achievement. We have strength in that area, but it's still there. For example, now they say they want to pave this street, and there is an assembly agreement. I haven't been to the assemblies in about 2 years. I'm in a phase of deep reflection. And then they approved laying the pavement. And I say, well, in my opinion, they should have put in other services first and then the pavement. For example, a system of wastewater treatment. The streets need to be torn up. If you already have pavement, then the pavement needs to be torn up again. And that pavement comes at a cost. But hey, people like to see the pavement. Yeah, that's right. And I respect
Pero
that.
lo que hablas. Escucho
But what
que
you're talking about,
hubo
I hear there was
sequía
a
bastante
pretty severe
fuerte
drought
el año
last year.
pasado.
So here,
Entonces aquí,
even though it
aunque llueve
rains a
mucho,
lot, water is
Sí,
incredibly
agua es
precious.
súper precioso.
Mira, aquí en los 30 años
In the
que
30
llevamos, yo
years
nunca había
we've
visto
been
una sequía
here,
tan
I've
fuerte
never
aquí en
seen
Fray.
such a severe drought
Fue
here
de
in
6
Fray.
meses.
It
Y
lasted
se
6
secó
months,
prácticamente
and practically
casi
everything
todo.
dried up.
Y
And
nosotros
we, in the
la
association,
asociación,
at
en
the
la escuela,
school, learned from that
aprendimos
drought.
de esa sequía. Y hoy tenemos
And
una
today we
propuesta.
have a proposal. We
Decimos,
say,
bueno,
well,
¿podemos
can we
evitar las
prevent
sequías?
droughts?
No,
No,
solo nosotros no
we
podemos.
can't do it alone.
Podemos
Is there
hacer algo para que
anything
nos
we can do
afecten
to
menos.
lessen the impact?
Sí.
Yes.
Y hemos
And we've
dicho,
said,
para
well,
la
for
gente que
people who
tiene
own the
tierra,
land,
queremos
we
que
believe that
seguir
continuing to diversify
con
with
árboles
fruit trees
frutales,
and
con
timber
árboles
trees is good
maderables,
for
es bueno
preventing
para
droughts.
prohibir las sequías. Dar cobertura al suelo.
Covering the soil
con
with
plantas
legumes, we
leguminosas.
believe, is also
Creemos que
preventing
también es
the effects of drought.
prohibir los efectos de la sequía. Y tenemos retos, ahora queremos
And we
aprender
have challenges.
a cosechar agua de lluvia.
Now we
utilizar
want to
las
learn to
aguas
harvest
residuales
rainwater
de
and
las
to
casas
use
para,
household
en
wastewater
tiempo de sequía, tener agua para las
to
huertas
have
familiares.
water for family
Esos
gardens
son
during the
como
drought.
desafíos que
Those are
tenemos.
some of the challenges we
Pero que
face.
ya
But
hablamos
we've
eso
already
con los
talked
chamacos.
about that with the kids.
Estamos
We're
ahora en
currently
este
in this.
año,
This year
es
it's
una cosa
mandatory because we
obligatoria,
saw the
porque
garden,
vimos
you see,
la huerta que ves
there
ahí
at the
en la
school
escuela que
you
viste,
visited.
quedaron los árboles frutales de
Only
raíz
the
profunda.
deep-rooted fruit trees remained.
Todos los que tenían
All the
raíz
shallow-rooted
superficial, como
ones,
el
like the
cebollín,
chives,
el
the zamat,
zamat,
and
la
the yerba mora,
no
were
quedó
gone.
nada.
Claro.
Entonces,
So we
hay que
have
evitar el
to
monocultivo
avoid
para evitar los
monoculture to
efectos
prevent the
drásticos de la
drastic effects
sequía.
of drought. We
Hay
have
que-
to,
creo que todo el que
I
tiene
think
tierra
everyone
tiene que
who has
plantar.
land should plant some
Porque
things,
si no,
because otherwise,
y aquí esto tiene mucha cobertura.
well, and
Hoy
this
ya tiene
has a
tiempo.
lot of
Siempre
coverage
le
here.
damos
You see,
mantenimiento.
it's been around for a
Y
while
aquí
now.
quisimos
We
poner un
always maintain
emprendimiento,
it. We wanted to start a startup business
procesar
here for
alimentos.
food
Pues
processing.
tenemos cierta
Well, we
maquinaria
have
ahí,
some machinery there,
pero no
but we
tuvimos
weren't
éxito.
successful.
Entonces ahí tenemos la casa.
So there we have the house.
El lote,
There's
cada
the
quien
lot.
puso su
Everyone contributed their
granito
grain
de
of
arena,
sand.
ahora hay ahí
Now there's a type
un
of
tipo de
flower
flor.
growing there.
Qué bien, hombre.
That's great,
Qué
man.
bueno
It's good
ver
to see
esta-
this.
Pues yo creo
I
que
don't
esto no
think
lo vio
Patricio saw
pero ahorita
this,
está sin uso.
but it's currently unused.
Entonces,
So,
Patricio vivió
did
con
Patricio
ustedes en su-
live
Estuvo un
with you
tiempo.
in your...
Mira que
He was
no traje
there
la
for a
llave.
while.
No traje la llave,
I
si
didn't
no
bring the
podías
key,
ver, pero creo que
otherwise
ahí
you
va-
could see,
ahí va a
but
haber
I
algo,
think
Patricio,
there's
que-
going to be
Espérame un
something
momento, voy a la
there.
casa y-
Wait a moment.
a ver si lo
I'll go to the
grabo.
house and let's see if
Eso
we
le
can
va,
record it.
recordar
This
a
is going to
Patricio.
bring back memories of Patricio. Very good.
Choco bananos.
Choco bananos.
Está muy bueno.
They're very good.
¿Tienes ganas de
Do you
atraer más
think you'd
voluntarios,
want to
Daniel, o-
attract more volunteers again?
Claro que sí.
Yes, if there were any, of course we would. And why not? There are plenty of people who come to Guate and go all over the place. Why not? It's a bit neglected. Patricio did see this. Who made them? A student. He's a hippie who spent some time here.
Some hippie that came through did that one.
Vamos a ver qué miras por acá.
Let's see what you're looking at over here. Ah, the lights don't work. I'll open this door. Ugh, it smells like it needs cleaning. Well, this is the venture we have. We want it to work. How lovely. We put things to wash and everything. Everything's fine. You turn off here. This is an oven, an engine.
¿Cuánta gente
How many people lived
viviría
here?
acá en un tiempo?
Cuando más vivieron, aquí
At
como
most,
12.
about 12
O sea,
people
no
lived
mesas de
here.
madera.
No wooden tables for cleaning. This is a food-grade stainless steel. We have a dryer here.
Cementos. Aquí tenemos una secadora.
A dryer.
Secadora.
Para sacar
To dry
jengibre.
ginger, a product that we made.
Hicimos, pero nos
But we
encontramos
found that
con
with
que
this type
con
of
este
wall
tipo de
and this
pared,
type of false
de este
ceiling, they
tipo de
wouldn't
cielo,
authorize the
no
venture.
nos autorizan el emprendimiento.
And so we trained 20 people to work on all of this. They started producing teas and flowers.
Empezaron a producir tés,
We sold teas and flowers, but no, we weren't successful because we found a buyer for 1 year. And he told us, I'll buy a little from you each month, but if you haven't obtained the health registration and started a billing system within a year, I won't be able to continue buying. And we didn't. It's a money problem. And well, this can be expanded upon. Speaking of that, is there any support we can offer here to help people be heard? Support that can help us take important steps forward? Look, we wanted to, well, when I say wanted to at the time, but we haven't given up, that we could process the surplus of products that women are diversifying in the villages to have added value and to be sold on the market. And that's why we started. This equipment was donated to us by New Zealand. This oven, all of this. And then we started training. A volunteer from Germany was here training people in processing. And she did it very well. You know, the Germans are very, very good at that. And well, they're very detail-oriented in everything they start with. And she trained the staff very well. I couldn't even come in here. You had to leave your shoes over there, put on slippers, cover your hair, put on gloves. We got to those conditions, and then we asked the people from the government, a unit of the MAGA department that authorizes the operation and sanitation of the hospitals. And he says, registering the trademark won't be a problem. It'll cost you 1,000 quetzales, and it's easy. And they offered us their support. And well, we thought, if we register the trademark, what's the point if we can get the health permit especially? And so we stopped. And then here you see, we tore down the wall. We reflected, and we said, well, maybe it's not worth continuing to renovate the Casa de la Solidaridad, but rather to build a new processing plant there on the Adelina's land. Well, that plant requires money. Two things, money and technical assistance to build it properly. And then, surely, the young people we trained have already found jobs elsewhere. They're working. I'm happy about that, even if it's not for this. And then we'll have to train people again, because the crops are still being grown. We've learned to make flour from turmeric, to dehydrate ginger, and to make teas from various plants, to make the tuber flour. There were about half men, half women here doing that. Excellent. But we had that problem. So, as you can understand, we also have to change the management of Adelina. We need to put someone more commercially minded in charge, and I'm not that kind of person. I'm a different type. It's good to have a teacher, an administrator, but we need someone more focused on business management, someone who can provide that business acumen that doesn't think too much about the people.
Estoy convencido que hay que cambiar eso.
I'm convinced that needs to change. So did Patricio stay here? Yes, there used to be beds here, but not anymore. We took them away. What's here now is there are remnants of where the packages were. You can see there used to be bottles here for honey. They used to make labels. But that's outdated now. See? This was the label, the brand. It's very, very pretty. Yes, that's over. That stopped. You see? It's still here. How old are they? Oh, sorry. Like 3, maybe 2 years. Not more. Yeah. So, you see They left their slippers there.
Pues fue.
Well, it was a dream. It was a dream that I still refuse to. But of course, this was designed as a house, not for an industry or a semi-industry. And of course, then the false ceiling made of good wood or of plastic or something. It has to be really, really smooth. They require it to be smooth so that it can be cleaned properly. Everything must be good. It can't absorb anything. This wouldn't work. They used to cut food here and they say no wood because wood absorbs a lot of dirt. Anyway, we put 220 volts there now. So that's how the house where Patricio is now. Tell him to get us support here so they can industrialize the part of Adelina and a good economist. If not an economist, then a good businessman should take charge of this. Because educators are bad at selling.
Gracias.
Thanks for talking to me, right? Okay, well, great chatting with you. It was a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Really, it's a pleasure, Antonio, to have you here. And, well, today I remembered a bit of my youth.
That was Cándido Reyes and La Nueva Libertad, Alta Verapaz, Guatemala. With thanks to the women of ACM, especially Marisela, including for a wonderful lunch after this walk and talk, and to the whole family for taking us out to the reacquired land Cándido talked about. That might make another episode worth sharing at some stage. Enormous thanks also once again to Dana Scott for the translated audio, and of course to you supporting listeners for making this episode possible. This week, special thanks to Ariad Isarina for your donation, and for such very generous subscriptions for 3 years now, Katie Ross, Sarah Mason, Nicole Brammy, and for 4 years, Michael Gooden. Finally, thanks Sarah Barker for buying a copy of my old mentor Frank Fisher's anthology off the website. If you'd like a copy, or to join this great community of supporting listeners, get some exclusive stuff, and help keep the show going, just head to the website or the show notes and follow the prompts. The music you're hearing is Regeneration by Amelia Barden. My name's Anthony James. Thanks for listening.